If I had a nickel for every time I made a video about how a Hydro character in an X7 patch had an underwhelming kit, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird it happened twice, right? It's been nearly 5 years since Genshin came out, and oh my gosh, it's been almost 5 years. Oh my gosh, I graduated high school 5 years ago! Excuse me, while I just... Since its release, the 4-star Hydro roster has been severely lacking. 2 of them came out in 1.0. In 3.1, Candace joined as our 3rd. You could consider Hydro MC as part of this roster, since they're basically a 4-star with a 5-star label, although it might be more accurate to call them a 3-star, am I right? But now it's 5.7, and Dahlia is going to be our newest 4-star Hydro, and his kit is definitely something that exists. You're probably clicking this video because you saw the weird title, Dahlia reminds me of Dehya, and I'm sure you're probably like, what the f is he on about? Their kits are nothing alike! So let me explain before you leave that comment. When it comes to kit designs and game concepts, I try to have some separation between the concept and the execution, the pieces versus the final product. In my eyes, both Dehya and Dahlia fall under this umbrella that the pieces were there, but the final kit design has a lot of flaws. With Dehya, it's a lot of problems with her feeling like there's 2 kits mashed into one, and neither aspect was very strong. In Dahlia's case, I think it's actually somewhat cohesive, but the aspect in his numbers and utility are just not it. I did question whether it was worth it making a Dahlia video, but I mean, it's Dahlia. I've been waiting for him for like 3 years now, so it's an obligation at this point. This video is going to cover his utility, and I'll talk about how his design is actually well executed in its foundation, but also what aspects shaped him to be this patch's doom posting victim. Before we jump in, as always, disclaimers, timestamps, social media links, music credits, and a link to my Discord server are all down below. This video will have to talk about some of Dahlia's numbers, so I will state directly here that numbers are subject to change. Anyway class, it's time for lesson 5.7.2, Dahlia and his power consolidation. Let's get started. So starting off, let's just cover general overview stuff. His skill places a little Hydro thing on the ground. If enemies touch it, it deals Hydro damage and applies the element once. If a player steps on it, it launches them up in the air. We'll kind of cover this later, but this is the less important part of his design. His burst is where most of his kit aspects lie. When you cast it, he creates a shield, and your active character gets a special effect. During this duration, this effect can create stacks, and if your shield breaks, you consume a stack to create a new shield. How do you get a stack? First method is to have your active character deal 4 normal attack hits. Second method is his A1 passive. Have your active character trigger Frozen, and this creates 2 stacks. Then this ties into his A4 passive. While the shielding effect is active, Dahlia grants the active character an attack speed bonus based on his max HP. As of right now, the max you grant is 20% at C0. If you get him to C6, you can grant an additional, unconditional 10% bonus, making the max value 30% instead. On the actual concept portion of his kit, Dahlia has a decent foundation. My favorite aspect is that he's providing an attack speed bonus based on his HP. Attack speed means you're landing normal attack hits faster, and landing hits faster means faster stack generation for your shield. It's a simple interaction, but it does work in tandem with each other. As for shielding, it is technically a new addition. Dahlia is the very first dedicated Hydro shielder. We're not including Lanyan over there because she's technically our first Anemo shielder, which inherently came with the absorption mechanic for Petch elements. Now, in terms of its flaws, it's very simple. The numbers do not stack up to what he provides in utility. My take on power consolidation for units is that everyone should have a certain power level that gets split, depending on what kind of unit you want. Let's say, on average, a balanced character would have around 100 units of power. Things like team flexibility might affect this value, as well as their synergy with other pieces of gear. For now, let's just look at this from a kit in a vacuum. An example is Shenyun being a plunge support with healing. You might say knock off 20 units of power because she's off-field friendly, which inherently makes her more flexible. But because she's in a plunging niche, you bump her up by 30 to make up for the lower flexibility. So she'll end up with a power level of like 110. Next, you allocate her power based on her utility. Maybe 50 goes into her healing, and the remaining 60 goes into her plunge buffing. And then if you take into account her gear, Running VV with Petch Element Plungers maybe just bumps up her power level by another 20. With a system like this, you have to consider two things. 1. The power level needs to be balanced around their niches. 2. The power allocation needs to be balanced based on the niches you focus on. With someone like Dahlia, he only has two forms of utility, shielding and attack speed. This by itself is a fine kit to work with, but with this utility, his numbers are also just too low to consider bringing value to his teams. It's like he has a proper 50-50 split between his utility, but his overall power level is something like 50 units. If you compare it to a character who has 100 power level, there's 50 units of dead space that he doesn't have. His shield multiplier is very low. C0 looked to be around 3000 HP, and if you get C2, 3700. He can generate 5 shields, so you technically have 15 to 18,000 shield HP to work with. But what you need to remember about shields is that when it breaks, characters take the remaining amount of damage from that enemy. Let's use this scenario. You give a character a straight 15,000 HP shield, and an enemy does 2 hits that deal 5,000 damage each. The shield will be able to tank all that damage and will still have 5,000 HP left. Now for Dahlia's shield, if you dealt the same hits, here's what happens. The first hit breaks the 3000 HP shield and deals 2000 damage. The second hit breaks the second shield, also dealing 2000 damage. In the end, even if the total HP of the shield is technically the same value, it's broken up into multiple segments. You are more vulnerable to front-loaded damage, and this causes the character to take more damage. In general, characters with this kind of mechanic still require some form of healing to provide strong survivability. Baishu is a good example of this. His shields are similar to Dahlia, in which the HP is very low. These shields exist only to provide interruption resistance, and will definitely still cause you to take damage. But most of his kit is healing focused, and this allows him to function as a solo survival unit. It's hard to give Dahlia that same expectation. You'll likely still need a healer, or be forced to dodge with iframes. Then there's the attack speed, max 20% at C0 and 30% at C6. This is debatably a good enough value, but once again, his only forms of utility are shielding and attack speed. Given that he's not bringing much else to the table, I would make the argument that he needs to have a higher attack speed buff to make it meaningful to bring into teams. I'm also going to nitpick the A1 passive. Fortunately, this passive isn't something that's forcing him to be only good in freeze teams. It just front loads his stacks in those teams to make it easier to build up. Meanwhile, other teams only have the normal attack method. But this passive only really makes sense in freeze teams against boss content, because in freezable content, the enemies are frozen and would not be dealing damage. So a shielder is less needed. Oh, and in boss content, the enemy hits hard, which relates back to the idea of still taking a lot of front-loaded damage with a shield like Dahlia's. I get that freeze teams are in need of some special treatment, which is why we have Skirk or Escoffier reigniting that meta. Dahlia doesn't need this niche. With how his kit is, you could make him trigger that front-loaded stack passive with any Hydra reaction, and I still think he would need buffs. So how would I go about buffing Dahlia? I have two methods here. One, buffing his current utility to a better level. This type of method is really just upping the numbers, so that even if he's not bringing a lot of utility to the table, he's bringing enough value in that utility to make him worth using. I think 40% attack speed that is accessible at C0 instead of C6 is a solid buff. As for shielding, you could consider increasing that shield multiplier to tank more damage, or pull a Baiju and add some healing when it breaks to at least mitigate the excess damage you tank from heavier hits. I'd like to also maintain the idea of that connective mechanic, with how attack speed buffing indirectly improves his shield stack generation. Buffing his shield to tank more damage inherently reduces the incentive of needing to get stacks. This leads into the other method I have for buffing Dahlia. Instead of filling up the empty space with more power in his only two forms of utility, you fill up that space with other forms of utility. My idea is this. Dahlia's shield works like Baiju's, in that it breaks every set duration, like 2 to 3 seconds depending on how fast you want it to be. When it breaks, it deals hydro damage and applies hydro. This means consistent hydro application for any teams that require it. It also still preserves the mechanic of wanting to build stacks. On a more fun approach, you could apply this to a skill instead. Instead of it being a one-time use case, it would stay underneath the active character and have a set amount of stacks. You can either consume some stacks to deal normal attack hits, which trigger and apply hydro damage, or you can use the stacks to jump, apply hydro, and allow for a budget plunging damage playstyle. I will say though, using the plunging method goes against the attack speed niche Dahlia seemingly has, but it's just an idea since the mechanic was there in the first place, and it would be nice to make it viable in combat, not just exploration. Overall, I think Dahlia is someone who's going to be functional and viable in basically any team. Even if his A1 is tied to freeze, it doesn't completely boot him into that kind of niche. The concept of his kit is a nice idea, bridging his shield stacking with the attack speed buffing, but I think his overall power level is just too weak to make him a genuinely strong character, and we know the devs are capable of making strong 4-star units. But that'll do it for the video. If you enjoyed, consider leaving a like and subscribing to support the channel. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on Dahlia's kit. Do you still want to try pull for him? And how do you plan to build him? If you're interested, consider joining my Discord server. Link down below. Thanks again for watching everyone, and I will see you all next time. Bye!